Hi everyone, I'm Valeria and this is Looks Like NYC. My guest for this episode is NYC-based production designer, fabricator, and stylist Jana Bergstedt. Jana is the owner of AMF Studios, a creative studio, freelancer collective, and Indigo apparel brand. You can view her work on her Instagram at Jana Does Things and check out AMF Studios at amfstudiosnyc.com. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's so exciting having someone who's like so multifaceted, and we've never had a production designer on. So I think it will be really interesting to hear about like what you do and stuff.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited.
So just tell us a little bit about what you've been up to. Like I always like to ask everyone this because, maybe you've been doing things that have nothing to do with like, what you usually do. So
Yeah, I mean, as a person, I'm pretty all over the board. Between filming mostly commercials. We did an editorial like a couple weeks ago where I was styling the props. The commercial we wrapped up yesterday was sort of like banking related. So that was sort of set dressing apartments that we like rent out in New York, and then I redress it to make it match the character. Right. So that's sort of the design side of things. I basically move apartments every week. Right. I find cute things and I put them in a new space and then we take it all down. So it's a lot of like heavy lifting, but it's fun and I really enjoy it.
Right. Yeah. So like as we were talking last time, you have quite a diverse like resume and projects. We spoke a little bit about why you moved to NYC. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I originally moved to New York 7 or 8 years ago to do costume design. I started sort of in the television world at the bottom of the totem pole, but I learned kind of how it all works from that perspective. Like the departments are huge, everyone's in a union, and it's really fast paced. And sort of after that experience, I wanted to like have a little more involvement. When you're a PA, you sort of do things for everyone else, and I wanted to have more of a hand in the design. And sort of by accident, I switched into art department, which is the props and the sets. And I ended up production designing for some smaller films, and then, kind of climbed a ladder in that world as well. So yeah, I sort of bounced around quite a bit because I was always sort of looking to learn what part of it I enjoyed. And you'd be surprised how many of the skills are like transferable between different departments and then eventually different industries.
Right. Yeah. Last time you told me that you actually had like a marketing degree. So I think it's interesting that you have like a marketing degree, but you chose to go into like prop department. Like why, why would you choose to switch into sort of like the art department?
Yeah, it's all a journey. And when I went to school, I was at a really large school, a Big Ten. So we had like 30,000 students, tons of different classes you could kind of experiment with. And my senior year, I took this class called costume design, and it was designed for actors. So it was pretty simplistic. It wasn't like cutting and sewing costumes, but it was like the theory behind it. Like, how do you portray a persona through the dress? Like what they're wearing and the colors that you're using. And it really tied in the element of the marketing degree that I was getting on the side with the apparel industry that I was interested in. Because marketing is like demographic. You really like drill down, like who is this shopper? Who's this consumer? What do they want? How do we give it to them? Or how do we speak to them? And in apparel, it's all about like, how does it fit on the body? And what is this saying about their personality? Like, why do they want to buy this from you, but from a more artistic sense? And the two just sort of married in costume design. Right. So when I took that class, I was like, I think this is it. And kind of on a whim moved to New York because I thought this was the only place I could actually try it. I'm from Minnesota and it's a pretty small town. So I was like, we got to go big or go home. So we're just going to show up and figure it out. So yeah, that's why I kind of stepped into the costuming world. And then from there, I just loved the film industry so much that I wanted to keep exploring like beyond just one department. I just kept finding things interesting and kind of following that trail.
Right. So like did you working in the prop department, does that sort of lead you to, you said you were a fabricator, did that lead you to like event design?
Yeah, literally. So a lot of propping is shopping until you get into really specifics where you kind of have to build things. You kind of have to make things like pull a string and make something fall down or fabricate something really specific to a character, customizing things. And that's sort of where the title of fabricator comes in. It's like, those are the people that make custom things, which is a huge range of what custom means. And we're just sort of in this era, I guess, pre-COVID, it was experiential events were everywhere, everything. And everyone in the corporate world wanted custom pieces, custom things for their events. And so they were turning to fabricators being like, hey, you make weird things all the time. Make this thing for us. And so I sort of shifted into that realm because I could make things. And so it's a lot of like floral backdrops for a photo booth. Or can you hang this crazy thing from the ceiling? We don't know how to do it safely. So it was like my expertise from art department sort of shifted into events that needed a lot of like styling and decor. So I kind of kept doing that too. And I juggle all of those things still. Like I like to have my hand in everything kind of at once.
Right. No, like you also spoke about how event design led you into like the wedding business too. Like, so
yeah.
How did that happen?
So my first real like event experience kind of came through the grapevine of texting other people like, who do you know? And it was a request for this, what I thought was a photo backdrop they wanted me to build. It was like a picture of this fringe thing. And I was like, I could build that. I was like, yeah, like, what do you need? Like, how can I help? And they're like, oh, we have it. We just don't know how to hang it up. Can you come help us like get it on the wall? And I was like, oh, that's like, yeah, that's what I do all the time. That's super easy. So when I showed up, I sort of fixed that. There was a couple different things that happened in the prep of that event that I was able to like creatively problem solve. There was like some hand-drawn calligraphy signage that got wet. So the ink started running and the sign was ruined. And I was like, do you have more paper? And she's like, yes, why? And I was like, just give it to me. So I held it up against a window. And so because it's transparent, you can see through it. So I traced the original design onto the new paper. Even though I don't do calligraphy, I could make it look similar enough. Right. So then we used my traced sign, instead of the one that got ruined. And so it's sort of a series of those little things that you have to think really fast on your feet, but they're just like quick problem solving. That's what film is all about as well. It's like that we got to work with what we have. We don't have a lot of time, like make it happen, make it good. And so working with that event planner, we really hit it off. And she's like, wait, this is amazing. Like, what else can you do with me? And eventually I signed on as a business partner with her. So she mainly does weddings. So I sort of transitioned into that. So sometimes I design little pieces for the weddings, like the ceremonies and stuff. Or I help her coordinate them because we're just a good team.
Right. Yeah, like I think it's interesting that sort of the reason that you were able to get into all these projects and like have all these different things going, it all started because of the design class that you took in college, despite you like going for like a business career. Would you recommend that people that are like business majors, they take like creative design classes of some sort?
Oh my God, 100%. Yes. What I learned, it was actually really funny to me. I sort of actually split my time more or less in half between the business school and the design school. We were such a big school that they were literally separate campuses. Right. But I took a lot of like finance, accounting, marketing classes. And in those classes, I was like the weird creative girl. And then when I would go over to the art school and I would take classes in like retail or like textiles and like fabric, and I took a few like graphic design courses, I was like the weird business girl. Right. Which was really funny to me, because I was like, I don't feel like I'm at either end of an extreme of anything, but these two groups of people rarely communicate to each other and they rarely communicate in the same way.
Right. Exactly.
So I kind of learned to be a bridge, and I think that's sort of why I liked like the corporate kind of events that were like, we have a ton of money, we're going big, but we want it to be creative and extreme and experimental. I really gravitated toward that because you can use the art side, but I know what they're looking for. Like they have an end goal, like they have a really specific objective. And I think I'm more of an analytical thinker. So I work well when there's like an objective to be had. Like, all right, so we're going to make it so exciting that X number of people will have to come through. Like they love it. Like it's sort of like goal driven. And I can understand what that means. And then I can translate that into a design that works for them because I can speak their language when they're talking about like the demographic stuff, when they're talking about their specific like business related things. I'm like, because of the business lingo I've learned, I don't think you necessarily need to take the classes and get a whole degree, like, but if you can understand how they see the world, like from a business perspective, you can then translate your art into something that they're willing to work with or like excited to work with. Right. I think that's where the fight and the battle usually is artists view the world a certain way and corporate entities view the world a certain way. And when it's done right, it can be so beautiful. It can be so much fun to experience. It can be great for like the world, but often they're at odds.
Right.
And so I definitely think that taking a business class or two just to get in the head of like, because they'll be your client someday. I think most people end up working for some sort of business.
Right.
Or at least if you have your own, your clients are likely businesses. So it's good to like understand where they're going when they request certain things.
So like, this is something that I feel like it's inevitable to talk because it affected everyone so much, but you spoke about how, you know, you had to switch from event design back into the film world. So
yeah, that was the panorama that we're in. Right. Events, you know, it definitely had to stop. Like we can't really be near each other at this moment. I think it's coming back slowly. I know people are definitely trying to take the right precautions if we're going to have a lot of people in a room together. But I think with the vaccines and everything, we're slowly coming to a point where it will be accessible again. But yeah, when it shut down, I was really glad that I still had the film connections in my back pocket because that's what came back first was commercials, because the big companies knew that they still needed to produce things. And the film unions were the ones that were doing it safely. You know, they were very serious about keeping all the protocols in place to make sure things could happen on set and they could produce new work, but in a safe way. And that's just like what some industries like weren't capable of pulling off. So, you know, commercials had the money and they had the resources to be able to do it. So that was sort of the first couple of jobs that I had coming back, you know, once some of the restrictions were lifted. But yeah, it was nice to still be able to have access to multiple types of like revenue, I suppose, for myself. You know, it wasn't just one industry that I was locked in, because a lot of the wedding people that I know really hurt from that hit, because weddings are the first thing to stop, you know, or get rescheduled. And it was a whole mess.
Yeah, like we recently spoke to a small business owner in Astoria. She does like floor arrangements for like weddings and stuff. And she was talking about how like, you know, her whole year got like wiped out because she had to move everyone to like 2021. And even people who had rescheduled for 2021 are trying to reschedule for 2022 because they don't even feel like safe to do their wedding yet, or they just feel that they can't do it to the scale that they want to. So they're like, I'd rather wait. So yeah, I can imagine that it was probably one of the industries that got hit the worst.
Yeah, it was really intense. I do feel bad for some of the people who had like a really solid like schedule already, like who had already locked in a lot of people, because, you know, if you bump someone to the next year, then you lose revenue for that next year. You know what I mean? Like you aren't getting a new client who's paying, you're getting the same client who might have a fee to change over, but it's not the same amount of money as like a fresh, you know, client. So that also hurt the industry as well. It was like nobody's fault. Like there's nothing you can really do about it, but it was like, if people kept bumping their dates, you now lost more and more potential client space because, you know, you're still dealing with the residual effects of like, you know, not actually executing that event. So you have to keep adding hours to it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's sort of like, who knows when we will actually go back to like, you know, the vaccines seem to be working, but, you know, it seems that some authorities are disappointed at the rate that people are getting vaccinated. So it's kind of like, and then, you know, the strains, it's kind of like, when are we going to like actually go back to it? So it's a little scary.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a guessing game for everybody. Like we're all hopeful, but there is really no definitive answer. So you have to keep adjusting, you know, at least as a freelancer, you have to keep adjusting your workflow accordingly. You can't just like stop everything and wait for it to reopen. You need to like start thinking about some other options.
Right. No, yeah, that's what we were talking about last time too, that you kind of have to like diversify what you do. So like in case that something like this happens again, you're able to like jump onto the next thing that you were doing that, you're still able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge advocate for what we call in the business world diversifying your assets. Because I think a lot of people, especially in the creative industry, don't realize how transferable their skills are. Like art department sounds really specific, like, oh, I do props for film, but it's like actually your problem solving skills are insane. You'd be great in events, you'd be great in, well, also theater is pretty close, but it's a different way to run the system, I think people started thinking really creatively about their, roles because of this pandemic. And I hope that they keep that in mind, in the future of like, how else, like who else needs this skill? Like what other industry can I jump to that might not be, quite as hurting as the wedding industry? Like who still needs organization and planners? Like I have a couple friends that are like production managers, stage manager type people who were thinking about jumping into the healthcare industry to just help coordinate, because they're like, this is what we do, organize people, schedules, turning things around on a quick timeline. We can't do our event jobs, but like vaccination is an event, like, getting people tested is an event. Like, can we help, with the flow of people, in a different realm? And I thought that was really interesting as well. Like some people really tie themselves to the title, like the job title or the role. And it's like, actually, you need to think about what the physical skills that you're doing are, because that's how you think about transferability more so than like, oh, my title doesn't exist in another industry. It's like, yeah, but all of those skills are like the same thing somewhere else. And that's what you need to start searching, or at least understanding, because for me personally, I don't like doing the same thing every day. Like I like to keep switching up between industries. So maybe someone who's a bit more similar to me, who doesn't want the same thing over and over, day in and out, they are the type of person who really needs to understand what they bring to the table skill wise, so that they can, jump between these industries just to keep it interesting for themselves.
Right. So like touching a little bit on that, like I want to talk about AMF Studios, which is like an idea that I think you started in 2017, if that's correct, I believe.
Yeah. So way back when, because I jumped between all these industries, I had a lot of friends who were in theater but wanted to try film, or they were like a photographer and they didn't know that they could shoot live events. They were only doing portraits. But I was like, but you shoot people. Like, why don't you shoot people in an event? And they were like, oh, I didn't think about that. So I was like, I love my friends so much. And I was like, they really need to get to know each other. And honestly, might be able to work together, help each other get jobs or work on personal projects together. So AMF stands for All My Friends. And it really started as a freelancer collective where I was just getting people together in little like gatherings, kind of small parties, introducing them to each other and just sort of hanging out. I wanted it to be super low pressure. But the premise was like, everybody knew me, like if you've ever gone to a party or an event and you don't know anybody, you don't talk, you show up, you grab a drink, you panic and you leave. Like I didn't want anyone to feel that way. And I wanted everyone to kind of feel like the room had been vetted almost, that like, oh, well, everyone here knows Jana. So therefore we have one degree of similarity, or like we have something we could talk about if we had to. But if they're all here, they're probably a freelancer. They probably work in the creative realm. They at least know Jana. She's friends with them. So they're probably good people. That's kind of the baseline I wanted to set. And then just let people have regular conversations or kind of bring up topics to get them chatting with each other. Some were more structured than others, but it was kind of really fun. It was just like, oh, like one was just like, let's go hang out at the park for one of the music events, and then other ones were more like workshops.
Right.
But then the COVID, and so we couldn't really meet up in person anymore. So I kind of had to shift gears, and really think about what I wanted to do now that I had like an actual LLC and like a full company.
Right. So like over the pandemic, you sort of switched over to like the Indigo dyeing brand, right? You switched over to Indigo dyeing brand, and you said that you had to learn dyeing because of a project that you were working on.
Yeah. So the dye stuff was sort of inspired by a specific role in the film industry called the ager dyer. So that is a part of the union at least in New York, it's called 764 IATSE. I'm in that union. There's a couple different roles that, one could do. It's like the wardrobe supervising, costumers, people being on set, working with the clothes, but you're not really the designer of the clothes. It's sort of a facilitator role. And so the ager dyer is the one that like matches colors, or if it's sort of like a really bloody scene, they make the shirt bloody in advance. Or if it's sort of this dystopian futuristic thing where everything is like everyone went to live underground and it's all like grungy and dirty, you take new apparel and you make it look old. So it's a lot of like shredding the fabric, dyeing it. There's a bunch of different products you can use to make that happen. But a large component of this job is dye, which can be a really intimidating thing to learn because it's permanent. Right. And there's not a lot of places out there to learn it. If you are in like a costume design course in school, I do believe it's part of the curriculum, but not heavily focused on and not very accessible to someone who didn't go to school for it. So I wanted to learn how to dye, and I didn't really know where to start. And so there's this folding technique called Shibori. It's a Japanese technique that I've always found just super beautiful. You typically use indigo dye with it. And I was like, you know what? This is really interesting to me. Maybe this is where I start. And I took a class, I think in February, on Shibori dye, where I learned about the indigo and I learned the folding process. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, well, I'm locked inside with nothing to do. I may as well keep practicing this. So because I practiced so much of it, I had a lot of extra pieces, and some of my friends were really into the design and like giving me a lot of confidence in like, hey, maybe this is actually a thing. So I just bought more stock, basically white garments, and kept going, and then turned it into an online store, which I sort of used AMF Studios as the umbrella company, because basically I already owned it, but a long time ago, I wanted to sell products that these friends had produced. A lot of them are artists themselves. And I wanted to get like, I guess an online store like rolling. And so I was like, I guess this is where we start to like learn that whole process. Let's just start selling this indigo and see where it goes.
Right. So yeah, like you said that at one point you were stocked at a boutique and that, for certain reasons the contract ended. Do you hope to like continue your indigo dyeing business and maybe like get like new stockists?
Yeah, I'm actually on the fence about that. It's a lot of hard work to produce apparel, and because it wasn't my primary income driver, to be honest. I have a lot of stock at my house, and I do need to reboot the online store. But it's sort of a time management thing because you book a commercial, and that sort of takes over your life for a bit, and then it's a lot of juggling. I would love for it to be in the store because it's really nice to not sell yourself like promotionally. It's really difficult to upkeep like all of the stock photos and promoting it on Instagram. And there's not a huge following at the moment. So it's not like automatically people are buying it because they know what it is. You really have to push. So I would love it to be in a store because I think people are really drawn to it. I had really good sales numbers at that last boutique. They just sort of had an end date of 30 days. So we sort of like contract ended and we sort of moved on. So yeah, but it's like a full-time job in and of itself, talking to boutiques, finding another place to put it, like, talking through contracts and like what the rates would be to sell it there. Every boutique is different and it's a lot of legwork. And so it's not for the faint of heart. You have to really want it. And I'm just sort of calculating if the indigo is enough or if a new color wave needs to happen. It's still kind of a question mark, but I think that's kind of the fun of the journey. Everyone that has reached out to me about it, they're like, we see the visuals, we see the garments, we love what this is. It's pretty clear what it is. I want to move towards either wholesale or basically pre-orders. Like if you want something, just tell me in advance. It's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to turn it around, but that helps with the stock issue and that helps with the waste issue. Like I don't want to keep excess stock because technically that is wasteful. Right. Like it doesn't need to be here until somebody wants it. but it's still batch processing. Like to do one shirt is the same amount of effort as doing 8 shirts because of the way the VAT works. So you kind of have to multiply, is one shirt like one off like worth it? Or do you try to get 8 to happen at once? There's a lot of math, but basically I definitely think I will always love indigo dyeing. And I think it'll always sort of like be a part of what I'm willing to offer someone. But I'm more interested in someone coming to me being like, I love this. Can you do like 30 of my band t-shirts? And I'm like, absolutely. Like that's of interest to me because you want it. I don't want to put things into the world that aren't wanted. Like, again, that's just way to me. So it's like, if you come to me with a request, that's so much better than me dyeing a bunch of sweaters and hoping people like them. I think it's more of a guessing game that way.
Right. Yeah. And so it's like you said, it's better. It's like, I feel like the pre-order model is like really good. And it's like a thing that a lot of brands should take up because a lot of, that's like the number one problem with like inventory management for them because they end up with a bunch of things at the end. And a lot of brands end up burning things at like afterwards. And that's
insane.
Makes no sense. Yeah. So it's like, I think it's a good model to follow of like, I'm not going to make more than people want.
Yeah, I can understand why people do make more, especially if you're not physically making it yourself because there's factory minimums. There's a whole process of like, they usually design like 6 months in advance. Like you're so ahead of the game. You need to put in a minimum number. I don't know if everyone can switch to this type of model, but definitely people who are making things by hand in their own home or studio.
Yeah, like small batch makers. I feel like it's a really good model. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth it. And I think consumers are finally coming to terms with the reality of like an art piece versus like a fast fashion piece. Where they're like, not everything can be shipped to you as fast as Prime. Not everything can be a 2-day turnaround. But if you love the garment and someone is making it themselves, hopefully you're willing to wait the 2 to 3 weeks for it to like happen on time.
Right.
But that's just consumer education. It's like we have to learn ourselves about these processes and like understand that it is better to be able to wait and have the thing that you really love than, there's a similar thing at some big box store. I'll just get that and it's cheaper, but it falls apart and you only wore it twice. So it's like we're all learning for sure.
Right. And I feel like lately there's been this sort of idea attached to like, like art pieces or like small batch pieces that it's people just feel like they're cooler. People like them. People show them off. So I think it's really cool that, that sort of perception is changing. Now they're more viewed as like luxury items, which they kind of are. Like small, smaller brand items are seen as like the new hip thing. So I think that's pretty cool. And I feel like it's really beneficial to like the smaller brands. And I feel like it's a good way to go with things.
Yeah. And it is art. Like I know a lot of designers that they don't necessarily do dye. I have a friend who like paints on the apparel. I have people that sew, like they basically repurpose, things they've thrifted and like put them together in a new way. And that's a lot of time and energy that one person has devoted to a garment. Like I sew a little bit, but it's not my main thing, but it takes a lot of time. And I think that that's reflected hopefully in the prices. And that's also some consumer education. It's like, this didn't get cranked out in 5 minutes. This took somebody 6 hours and plus some, so it's the prices are going to be higher to reflect that. And hopefully people can understand that. And like you said, it is sort of like a bragging rights. It's like, ooh, I got a small batch piece. There were only 10 of these made and I got one of them. And I hope that continues because that's super awesome to the artist as well. And they're like, I'm honored that you're bragging. Like, I'm honored that you think it's worthy because it is a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears that go into these things. And so I think like just social media, a lot of the behind the scenes videos of like people actually finally watching what goes into this has just leveled up that appreciation factor. They're like, wow, this is actually really difficult. And like, I can't believe you can do this by yourself. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's really helped because I feel like, when you don't see like small batch makers or like producers making these things, you kind of, you have no idea. But when you see that the process takes 6 hours, you kind of value it more because you can sort of, you can't put monetary price on like, effort or like work, like physical work. But I guess you could sort of appreciate it more and like justify paying like $100 more for an item.
Yeah. And you know where it came from.
Right.
I think that that's super interesting. I think about the things that I've been willing to pay more for, or when I've traveled and something felt really special, it's like, this speaks to me and that's why I want it. And I think that's what people are understanding more now. They're like, wow, I've seen the backstory. This speaks to me. I want to support this. I want this in my life. And like, I think that really speaks to the rest of their life, like how they proceed, as humanity. I think appreciation across the board is always a good thing.
Right, exactly. So just before I let you go, what piece of advice do you have for someone who may be unsure about where to take their careers?
Ooh, I love this. Are they switching careers or just in general, we don't know where to start?
I feel like in general, they don't know where to start.
I think really what it comes down to is what brings you joy. I know that this is like kind of a thing people say all the time, but I think we're all humans individually like designed with things that we love, things that we're drawn to, things that make us happy. And if you can kind of narrow down what those things are and build your life around them, I think that you're setting yourself up for an incredible life. I think like I grew up crafting at my grandma's table, like cutting and pasting things. And I'm a fabricator now. I make things for other people all the time. And I never thought that would be a job. So I think, and some people maybe just like flowers make you happy. And maybe you want to work with flowers, or maybe to like textiles. Like I am like drooling over like beautiful embroidery. And so I think that's what led me to costumes as well. And it's like, you don't need to pick just one thing, but I think if you keep bringing things back into your life that that you really love, you can find a role adjacent to them. Right. And it comes down to a bit of research and like digging deeper. But I think even with just your podcast, like people listening, like they get to hear from so many different types of people who have different types of roles, that it's just educating yourself on like what's out there, like talking to more and more people about like what even exists. Like I had no idea this type of life was even possible growing up in such a small town, and I love it. And I think people sometimes are scared of change, or they're scared to like go out on a limb. Freelancing can be scary because you're never guaranteed anything. Right. But I personally think it's like I could do everything. Like I can choose to take as many projects as I want, rather than be limited to my 9 to 5, stuck in a cubicle, told what to do every day. It's just not my personality. And it's like, yeah, I'll take the roller coaster of like when the paycheck is coming, but you can really build your life around other elements. And I think that that's just a more interesting way to live.
Right. Yeah. It's like, like the same reason. That's actually why I started the podcast, because it was like, when I first started, I had no idea that some of these things were even options, and it was like, so I was really interested about hearing what everyone did, because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm a makeup artist. It was like, I'm a makeup artist, but I also do this. And then like this, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I wanted, people to find out about it, because it took me so long to find out about these things. And it's like, I want it to be easier for people to like get to know about these type of lifestyles. So yeah, I agree with you that it's like, I rather be doing 3 things at once than be stuck to like a cubicle.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to harken back to what we said in the beginning, it's like, if you're in business, take a design class. If you're in design, take one business class, just to understand what else is there, because we can kind of get into our own little echo chambers, especially social media. Like you kind of start to believe there's only one type of thing. Just shake it up on purpose, just to see how other people view the world. You might be the perfect like creative person who lands this business job because you can speak both languages, kind of thing. You never know. You might actually find the right role, like helping the outsider understand your industry or something like that. Right. Like there's so many options out there. I just want people to keep exploring.
Right, exactly. But just thank you so much, Jana, for coming on. So just as a reminder, you can check out her Instagram at Jana Does Things, and be sure to check out AMF Studios on their website, amfstudiosnyc.com.
Thank you so much.